question of, well, who am I and who is the platform engineering community? So platform engineering community started a few years ago, really focused on this transition, I guess, away from DevOps. I know that's a bit of a touchy topic, to become really the largest platform engineering focused community in the world. So there's about 270,000 people who intersect with content everywhere, whether that's in newsletters or reading blogs or PlatformCon, our big conference. You might have seen us at some of our roundtables, community meetups like this. And that community has grown fairly meteorically over the last few years, I think. I think would be an understatement. And people often ask me why. Is it because everyone who used to have DevOps in their title has renamed themselves to platform? Partially. But a larger part of that is really some of these other mega trends, to use a very corporate word, and probably won't be the last one from me. And if you probably saw the event title, there's a great big old word called AI. I would assume there's a lot of people here who are familiar with AI, maybe even work in AI. Well, AI is really one of the biggest reasons why platform engineering has swept quite a storm. A lot of research has come out recently, well, it's funny to say great report because I wrote the report, a report with great research, I will say, really digging into this intersection between platform engineering and AI, and this kind of symbiotic relationship, as I would call it. Now, there's lots of great stats. There's this awesome 95% number from MIT, where 95% of AI experiments at enterprises fail. You might have heard that. In our case, it was I think it was 93% was the failure number. In Dora, it was 96. Whatever the specific number, a considerable amount of AI usage in the enterprise fails. But there are clearly those people who are succeeding. And what are they doing? What are they doing differently? Well, the research that we in the community have stumbled upon, what Google with Dora have stumbled upon, what MIT stumbled upon as well, is AI is succeeding in the enterprise when it has those very strong foundations. It has those fundamentals down. And we're going to cover a lot of this topic, and Faisal and Aaron, who are going to introduce themselves in a moment, are going to be a lot more detailed than I will be. But what we've really seen is that those enterprises that succeed in their AI experimentation, their AI initiatives, are the ones with a strong platform layer beneath it. So that's why this event is really focused on that intersection between AI and platform engineering. And I kind of want to see a raised hands to start us off, just so we know what the balance is. So raise your hand if you work in platform engineering or more on the software side. So 1, 2, 3. So much kind of smaller range. Now, who would say you work more AI specific? I like that you all chose to sit on that side of the room, basically. You naturally folded together. So we'll, of course, shepherd the conversation. That's where all the hallucinating is going to come from in the corner. So I think enough from me at this moment. We're going to try and keep it light, keep it conversational. But I wanted to kind of set that stage for some of the concepts that on the AI side, some of you might not be too familiar with some of the things we're talking about from platform engineering. But if the research in almost all categories are saying platform engineering brings some of those foundational points, some of those fundamentals that drive to success, might be a pretty good idea to understand what we're talking about. And then from the platform engineering side, well, hopefully we cover some really cool AI stuff too. So enough from me for now. I want to hand over to Aaron and Faisal and give us as long and detailed an introduction of yourselves as you'd like. We've got plenty of time. So Aaron, how about you take it away?
All right. Hi, I'm Aaron. I do applied AI in what we call the Applied AI Lab for DJ's Cloud at NVIDIA. And the first thing I'll say is when I hear stats like 5% of AI prototypes succeed, I'm actually quite encouraged by that. I would also say that the definition of success is kind of dumb. I've read this study. What percentage of those do you think people learned enough in the prototype that they learned not to do AI because it's the wrong problem for the job? That's a success. How many of those teams built a prototype? It didn't go to production because somebody invented an MCP server that just does the thing. That project died. That was a success. So, let's make sure we set the bar at the right level here. I actually think it's pretty amazing that we've had as much success as we've had. I do think a lot of that is because we have great platforms on which we can do AI. It turns out that, unlike kind of that old school DevOps software development, we had these really complex platforms and, 90 YAML files and da-da-da-da-da. And now we just have the completion endpoint. It's way easier now. We don't have to do as much. Maybe the reason that the platform stuff will work a lot better is instead of worrying about Kubernetes, I'll tell you what, I don't lose one bit of sleep over not knowing Kubernetes, knowing it's just down there making the GPU instances go where they need to go. And we just worry about training great models. We worry about converging. We worry about evals. We worry about lots of things. But the best thing about platforms in AI right now is I don't have to think about Kubernetes very much. Nothing against Kubernetes if that's what you do. I love it. I'm just glad I don't have to think about it. Anyway, that's me.
Thank you. Faisal here. I'm with Ahead, a consulting firm. We do a lot of vendor selling as well as consulting services. My background is in platform engineering ambassador along with Sam. And I help customers figure out from an AI perspective, whether they have a whimsical case or they have a real business value case before we even start talking about platform and the architecture. From a platform engineering perspective, that's where my focus is. I help organizations kind of figure out the gaps that were left behind by DevOps and how to kind of help them make that adjustment so you can have consistent and repeatable patterns and a foundational layer that helps them kind of move forward. That's my background.
Very nice. I actually have a second mic here, but I forgot about that until you handed it to me. So I had a completely different question I was going to start with, but I think you kicked me off so wonderfully, Aaron, that let's start by talking about success. This idea of whimsical or actual business value. What does it even mean to be successful in AI? Oh, wait, you have that.
We'll figure out the mics at some point. Did you deliver business value? Did you deliver learning? Did you deliver deciding not to invest because you found out, you discovered through the course of doing it that you're solving the wrong problem? Those are all tangible versions of success. Okay, in some cases, you avoided spending like what Bloomberg spent, apparently $50 million on a GPT 3.5 class model based on all of what they built. Initially, it was successful. My guess is anybody there might even be some people here in the room that might have worked on that. Was that a failure? I don't know. Right? I think over time you'll find that maybe it was successful. I think it's very fuzzy to determine. But at the end of the day, did you deliver business value? Did it go to fraud? Did it actually service customers? Did it actually make better recommendations that somebody may not have taken advantage of because it made a good recommendation? I'll tell you what, in our case, we found all sorts of new kinds of fan failures in GPU clusters because it was able to do massive analysis, a little engine we built that was able to look at 10,000 clusters independently, GPU clusters, read data out of them, and alert us to issues of fan failures that we thought were much bigger issues, turned out to be much simpler. To me, that's success. And it probably wasn't going to be possible without the kind of analysis that you can do with scaled inference across, your hardware fleet. So I think it's going to be nuanced per person. That's the way I have to look at it. But I also have to look at this in the sense of it's a moving bar, right? So the thing that you're building right now, and in fact, what we spent most of 2024 building, I had an engineer able to replace it in 6 hours with MCP servers and modern tooling compared to the archaic tooling of 2024 in 2025. Is that failure? No, that's success because we learned how to structure those systems so they could actually work better. And it really paid off in our future investments. So same theme, set the bar the right way. Did you learn things? Did your organization learn things?
I want to zoom in just for a second on this idea of setting the bar the right way. I mean, what we, in our research in this great, again, I said great, I wrote it, just remember that, very biased. this report, the state of AI in platform engineering. So one of the things we found was on exactly this idea of people defining what success means. You would often have organizations get a mandate saying, well, use AI. That was their kind of AI mandate that they have. And the goal was use more AI. You can imagine why they then are saying, oh, we didn't see any ROI, we didn't see any business value, because it was this kind of vague notion. You might have these early successes, these early wins. Oh, we can generate code super fast. Wow, our documentation like looks so much better and it's full of M dashes, which is great. But then you start to be, okay, what's the next step? And you're now in this kind of AI implementation plateau that we're talking about. So I want to just zoom in on defining the success on an individual level. So what, Faisal, might you, if you're in an organization and you're setting something for this AI initiative, how are you thinking about how they can define success? Because yes, of course, business value, but that's going to look very different for, one app at United Health versus another app at, Waymo. Or is it?
Yeah, I think when I think about a success is to start with a platform that is going to do exactly what it's meant to do. But before it does all of that, does it have the foundational layer? And what does that mean? Observability, security, right? Like you start to plug in all these things and you want to enable your platform to do AI things, but does it have the observability? Does it have the security? You got all these models and MCPs and you're making these API calls. How do you ensure that those tokens, for example, are secure, right? How do you make sure that you protect yourself as a business, right? From users who might be using context that may not need to be shared or exposing data, right? So I would say at the heart of it, it's starting with those two layers and saying, do I have the foundation to stand up and support this AI journey? As simple as that. And I kid you not, working in healthcare space and financial, oftentimes that's where the conversation starts. You have a platform, does it have that foundational layer to support us from observability and security? Every time.
I could build on that. I was trying to come up with a quippy example of business value. We were working with a startup. I'm not going to get into specifics, but we do have a press release on it, some of the details. But what we were able to do is use scaled inference to help diagnostics. So it turns out when you go to the doctor, they're vibe doctoring. They have 5 minutes to make a diagnosis, read your entire medical record, look at your vitals, and figure out what you might have. Okay. What if you could take a bunch of scaled inference, almost like a second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh opinion, have it use that security model in a healthcare setting to understand, okay, well, in this context with this doctor, what part of the medical record is going to be relevant for lupus? What part of the medical record is going to be relevant for COPD? Go on down the line for possible diseases based on a symptom and actually get a better diagnostic. Okay. To me, that's not just business value. That's holy hell, we can do a better job at diagnosing disease with technology we have right now because of scaled inference. And so once you've seen that a couple times, it makes you start to think about, well, what other areas can we make it worth it to make all these layers you're talking about work really well? Things like don't ever give an AI agent even the same rights that you have as an individual, because you as an individual or as a human are probably given a lot of rights where you can exercise your judgment. LLMs have no such judgment. They have a set of rules that some of their kind of model might have given it based on the average of all human text in most cases. So of course you must constrain the rights that it gets within that platform. You must have a platform that can support those things. Otherwise you'll get these great results and you won't be able to deploy them because they won't pass audit. Right. So that's where this stuff has to really matter to make sure all those stakeholder interests are protected while you're getting all these great results that we're going to get from AI, everything from the medical cases to the Waymo I took here today, which is just another AI agent that happens to have wheels.
I want to ride in a Waymo so bad. Just a little bit of a deviation there. Never rode one. I think one place we should probably zoom in here at at this stage, I meant to do this at the beginning, but I got too excited on the idea of success, is a little bit of definitional stuff. Because, you know, we say these words platform, and I know the three of us up here mean something with when we say that we would hope is aligned, and I would say it is. But if I asked almost each person in this room to be like, well, what do we mean when we're talking about platforms? So I'm wondering, Faisal, if you might define, when we say platform, when we say platform engineering, what are we actually talking about?
Yeah, I think maybe even a step before that is, are you talking about platform for AI? Or are you talking about AI for platform engineering, right? So the two different things. And when you think about, for both of these cases, right, you've got certain planes that we define within platform engineering. So those are, as I said before, you have observability, you have security, then you've got integration and delivery plane, right? That's your CI/CD. And then you've got developer control plane, your portal. So those are just some of the hallmarks, right? And then you've got resource planes. Resource planes could be your Azure, it could be your AWS, it could be data center, right? It could be going further down, it could be a Kubernetes cluster, whether you use a flavor of Red Hat or Tanzu from VMware. So again, just taking a step back, right? When you think about platform for AI versus using AI to support your platform, two different things.
I would agree with that. I think it's really important to be good with definitions. When I think about platform, I think about the platform on which you can run AI, because that's what I naturally do. But it turns out you still need the boring old kind of computing that's just deterministic, insert the money into the bank account, stuff that you're never going to have AI really, write for you. It's worth writing that on your own. And so you're going to do it that way. So to me, platform, obviously it's layers. It's, can I get compute? Can I get accelerated compute? Can I get GPU compute? Can I get it in the form factor I need? There's some new things that AI introduces to our classical thinking of platform, which, used to be, everything from, do I have my compute resources? Do I have them orchestrated? Do I have other services and software at the PaaS layer all the way out to the SaaS layer, right? So we stick at IaaS and PaaS here for a second. There's things you care about when you're doing a GPU platform. If you're trying to do model training at scale, you kind of care, do all the GPUs exist in the same room? Because the networking you get will dictate how quickly you can actually train your model. So you care about a whole bunch of things that I would like to not care about it, but as much as I don't want to think about Kubernetes, I have to think about it in that aspect, right? So I care about different things, but the same fundamental things are true. I need access control to who's developing the model. I need access control to who's doing inference on the model. A lot of these are very much in protected industries. In fact, most of these AI initiatives are around some of the most protected data because it's some of the highest stakes investments people are making. People are investing $50 million into model training. They're not doing it over trivial data that's not worth anything. It tends to be these big investments in the first place. And so in a lot of ways, we're having to get these platforms right from the beginning because the market just won't let us not do it correctly, which is actually slowing down the rollout, but for good reasons.
I would zoom in then on both within the definition of things and the roles that kind of connect to them. So platform engineer, I made a joke before about DevOps people rebranding themselves into platform engineers. I think this was quite a staple 3 years ago, but the role of the platform engineer has changed a lot. I used to host events like this, roundtables, basically almost every month for 3 years. And I can tell you that 2 years ago, 0 people ever talked about GPUs or AI platforms or basically any keyword even remotely related to them. Now, Faisal and I did a roundtable less than about last week, and I had to stop the conversation. I had to pull people off the topic of GPUs because I was like, I care about it, but we can't just talk about this for 2 hours. And I had to do it on the first one. I had to do it on the second one. The situation in the world of a platform engineer is changing. And I'd like to zoom in on what that means in terms of the role. Is it the same person running all of these things? Is there a new AI platform engineer? Is it a data platform engineer? What does this mean in terms of the kind of the jobs of some of the platform engineering people focused here?
Yeah, so at ahead, one of the things that I guess I lead with is to kind of figure out the existing personas, right? So you got a traditional data center, maybe cloud, people in infrastructure as code engineers, right? But then what does it mean to have a platform engineering discipline? And what that essentially means is to go back to the definition of what is a platform engineer, right? Your job is to abstract that layer, right? And provide a developer a way to go and do things, right? And so you're exposing that abstraction layer to the developer. And that adds up actually at least an additional persona, which could be in the old days you can think of as a DevOps engineer, right? Who better than a DevOps engineer to say, I understand what is it that exactly a developer needs? Because traditionally they are the ones sitting closer to the developers, right? So there are a couple of different personas. The infrastructure platform engineer, their job is to kind of build that layer. The DevX is supposed to help with, or DevX platform engineer, they're supposed to help with building those golden paths, understanding what the developer needs. And then you've got a product owner, right? And I think we didn't talk about platform as a product, but that's very relevant, right? Because you want to treat your platform as a product. And so you've got a platform product owner persona. And then you've got all these other stakeholders that are traditionally infrastructure operations and security. So perhaps you are in a data center, right? And you use VMware Stack and you got some storage, you got some networking from Infoblox, maybe you got Palo in the mix. And so those are your stakeholders as a platform engineer. But at a core of it, it's infrastructure and platform engineer, a DevX platform engineer, a product owner to start with.
So one of the things I learned, I didn't realize this until I got an intern in 2024 that was mostly a model researcher and not a developer. I had to teach him what GitHub was. He's lived in Jupyter notebooks his whole life. He doesn't know what Git is, doesn't know what Kubernetes is, knew what this thing called Slurm was. And a lot of them are kind of from that world. And so I think when you were talking about personas, I'm like, there is a whole model researcher persona that's somewhat adjacent to the data scientist persona that might have grown up using R and mostly Python and wouldn't touch Kubernetes if they, unless something really terrible has gone wrong. They don't want to be in that either. So I think that's part of it as well, like understanding those personas and understanding how they interact with a system. How do they iterate? How do they, what would a integration product, what would a continuous integration product look like if it were doing it with Jupyter notebooks on model training for code that actually doesn't change that much, but the data changes all the time? That's a little different than the paradigm. I was a classically trained software engineer. It's what I did for 30 years. And I always assumed the code was the most volatile part of the code base, not the data. Model training switches that around. And at scale, data gravity becomes a thing. So these things look a little bit different. The things people are solving for look a little bit different. The iteration cycles are different. But what happens is when you bring in a team, in my lab, we have people that are model trainers. We have people that are agentic software engineers that are formerly software engineers. We had to figure out a way to blend those personas to work moderately well together in a unified team so they share assets. And so I don't know. I think the more you go into this kind of world, the fuzzier it gets and the more nuanced the answer gets because it depends on the composition. Are you mostly model training people? You're probably going to be very Jupyter notebook based. If you're mostly AI engineers, used to be developers with maybe one model researcher, you might make that researcher learn what Git means and then learn how to do other Git commands, which is like Greek to them, like rebase. Oh my God.
I think we've been focusing a lot, understandably, on the kind of the enterprise side. I'm curious here, looking around at some of the faces that I recognize, how many people here work or run an AI vendor? So you're trying to sell AI as a startup. I checked you guys in, by the way. I saw your companies you work for. I know you're lying. So which of you, who here works for like a startup or a tool that is an AI tool that you're trying to sell to companies? Yeah, there we go. I see you don't have your hand up over there. I know you're lying. Okay, that's quite interesting. So how many then people here work for a large enterprise rather than like an AI tooling vendor? Okay, more. just very organic. I wrote a bunch of questions, and you can see I haven't looked at my computer. I like to steer it to where it's valuable, and we will take some questions in a bit. But let's zoom in a little bit more on this platform as a product thing. So platform as a product is really, I would say, probably the fundamental tenet of platform engineering. If you ever talk to someone and they're like, hey, I'm a platform engineer, and you're like, oh yeah, platform as a product. And they're like, what's that? They're not a platform engineer. You would be surprised how often this happens. But I think it's good to zoom in on this idea of platform as a product to really understand what we mean when we're talking about platform engineering, and then how you can think about that in an AI context. So maybe Faisal, if you want to start us off by defining platform as a product.
Yeah, so think about this way. Your job is to facilitate and help an internal developer, right? Do they care that you run Terraform or infrastructure as code? Do you care that there are other components that they need to know? They don't, right? So the job of a platform product owner, the way I think of it, is to help see the needs beyond today, to see what are those capabilities that a platform is going to need and how to grow that platform. So if a DevX platform engineer is working with a developer persona or developers to figure out what are the immediate needs, the platform product owner, their job is to start putting things in motion for what comes 3 months, 6 months, and beyond. They're helping mature the platform as a product. Now, that could be you start out with some very minimal product pieces, and as you start to grow, you start to add things into the mix. Maybe there's something in the observability plane that you need to expose. Maybe something in the integration plane, right, that you need to add. Maybe eventually you get to a point where you have exposed your documentation, your APIs, right, and now you're ready for a portal. So the job of a product owner is to have that view, to see how the product matures, and to kind of start gatekeeping that type of journey from a platform perspective.
We know our major cloud providers are awesome at this because the AWS console is almost as good as the GCP console at being intuitive, right? Right? Oh no, I need AI just to interpret that page. But you're right. I mean, I think I was in some of the early products of platform talks. In fact, even before I was doing AI, I think I did one of the early platform engineer things about it. And I got on the stage, I'm like, hire a freaking product manager for your platforms. Otherwise, you're going to end up with the AWS. I didn't quite say it like that. And sorry for my friends at AWS, but I don't think they didn't. That was the best product experience ever. But it came out of a fundamental notion that wasting developers' time and making it hard for them to do their jobs is probably going to make it harder for you to get the outcome you want. At the end of the day, I mean, listen, I don't think anybody thinks about your UI to Workday as a employee. Otherwise, it might look different, right? No offense to Workday, because the customer isn't the product, buyer, right? But where we really care about efficiency, this day-to-day experience that developers have to work in, or model researchers have to work in, or anybody else has to work in, we care about you getting what you need from that so you can focus, use your context window on the things that actually matter. Right? Every minute that you're messing with Kubernetes, well, I said it before, I'll say it again, is a wasted minute in terms of product results for outcomes that you're trying to achieve. You don't care about Kubernetes. You care about selling more widgets. You care about having better diagnostic rates in your, for your healthcare software. You care about that. And so you care about the product to the degree it gets in your way. Have it get out of your way.
So let's dial down some of the things that we've established here. I mean, we've said basically that same one sentence at the beginning, that if you want to succeed in AI in the enterprise, then you need a good platform. That's a very, very simple breakdown of the full extent of this. And I think maybe let's spend some time now zooming in on some of the specific challenges. Basically what I am going to just do this whole panel is think about the research that we did, the issues that people had, and then ask you guys what maybe they could have been doing or could have been thinking about. And I think some of the keywords, really, I thought it should have been probably the enterprise word of the year if we grabbed it, was this idea of guardrails. I don't think I ever heard the term guardrails 2 years ago. And now I feel like I say guardrails every single day, and everyone's always talking about guardrails. And I think any one of us who's used AI, I mean, we all know it's fantastic, but guardrails are a thing that are kind of needed. And this fear of AI is a slowdown point in the enterprise. Most of the people we asked, when we asked, oh, are your security teams or your compliance teams, are they really supportive of your AI initiatives? Overwhelmingly, no. When we talked to the security people, when we asked about these governance questions, it was like, well, do you have protocols in place? Some were like, oh, a little bit. Overwhelmingly, they just basically banned the use of AI or created incredibly strict, very, very, very strict uses for it. And that probably, whether you're working in the enterprise or you're a vendor trying to sell into the enterprise, is something that I assume everybody in this room has come up against. This challenge of navigating the kind of the compliance question, the governance question, what guardrails do we build in that kind of make sure everything isn't going to blow up, because we all have those hilarious, oh my God, the AI did that, this was a disaster stories. But so many of us also have those stories of like, well, we can't get anywhere because we're not allowed to do anything. I'm not allowed to tie this tool or test this or try out this process. Or worse, something that was raised in a roundtable. We're allowed to use this one tool because it went through the official procurement process. We thought that might have been the tool that was the one. It's been approved. Now it's locked into a 3-year contract. And I have to use that tool, even though I kind of just realized after a month it actually sucks. I should be using this one. But now I'm stuck. Our enterprises and our enterprise systems of governance, of guardrails, of procurement, are not designed for this new paradigm that we're in. And so this is an incredibly open topic, really, to zoom in on. But I think in terms of value we could add for everyone here, whether you're working in an enterprise or whether you're trying to sell AI into the enterprise, navigating this question of governance, of client compliance, of guardrails. So very open door, but I'd love, Aaron, if you start us off.
So I think I invented this term called angry intern. That's what AI really stands for. Treat every AI like an angry intern. Give it access to things as though you kind of plan on it trying to screw up your stuff, right? I'm not saying every intern is an angry intern. Most of mine are really quite good. I don't know about yours. But without being troll about it, there is a lot of fear out there. And I think sometimes the key is you have to kind of figure out, where are they really coming from? Are they coming from kind of an earnest place of, I want this to work, I'm worried about the implications of it. Let's work together to make sure that we give, say you're generating Python, you're going to run it in a Docker container. That should be a sealed container unless you have very specific endpoints you want to be able to call. And it should be able to call one endpoint that reads data, reads one kind of data with a model that's probably either fine-tuned or at least prompt engineered to only ask certain kinds of questions of that within the range of what you want that particular instance of a model to do. Okay, you can set up some of these very constrained pilots. They're going to have a 0% failure rate because you've only given it what you would give the dumbest possible person you could possibly get on the street to do. You can make it foolproof, but still able to answer one or two questions. And you might start by just kind of cascading that in. You start to, okay, great, we have one tool, we have two tools, we have 5, and they're pretty safe. You can start to bring in some of these other kind of SaaS tools that have the benefit of a brand standing behind it and saying, no, this would never screw up. It might, but still, it's got somebody standing behind it. If you're working, and that's if you're working with the kind of security folks that haven't really learned how this stuff really works, but need some kind of, for lack of a better term, some sort of vetting from some party they trust that does, right? Or they might bring in somebody that's a consultant that might understand a little bit better. Maybe that's a path to doing it. But the real blessing and the thing I would look for most companies to find are people that are kind of your CISOs, your chief security officers that are AI aware and are somewhat incented to actually get results from this, right? It's kind of like what we made, I know we always troll in platform community, like DevOps is dead. Well, DevOps was made for a reason. And that's because when Dev and Ops were separate, they had very separate motivations. Dev was make more changes because my job is to make changes happen. And Ops was, I don't want downtime, change nothing. And so we gave them the same common incentive to say, no, you're based not on how quickly you ship or how few incidents you have. Your outcome is going to be based on this business outcome, right? And that's what DevOps was ultimately found on, and what platform engineering now is kind of a more mature version of it. It's the same thing. And the same thing has to happen with security ops with AI thrown in, right? You know, if you get people that understand and want to be part of the solution, the tools are out there. You can build identity for agents. It's very limited in terms of what its scope is. So you can constrain what it's able to do. And then you're not going to get it writing $5,000 checks to, you know, customers that prompt engineer the thing to give it one, because ultimately at the end of the day, there's a deterministic system that's looking at checks going out saying, no, you can't issue that. And it's an interplay between non-deterministic systems that might do the exploration and deterministic systems that actually set the rules. And that's when people talk about guardrails, just another term for things we do to make it not do dumb stuff. And there's a lot of that we can do if you're really worried about it. And that's probably where most of the work is.
Yeah, I think what I would add is starting with guardrails, service control policies, especially if you're in the AWS world, right? These are some of the basic things that you do. And then as you start to look at, say, platform for AI, you start to add other components into the mix, right? AI gateways, how do you leverage those to ensure that your context is safe, right? Your tokens are only being used when they're supposed to be used and not being leaked. But then in other cases, when I'm working with customers, believe it or not, you're using other LLMs or models to generate code. You take that code and then you apply it back to your business applications, right? How do you ensure that the code that you have applied, refactored, that it's safe, that it doesn't go against your architecture patterns, right? It doesn't add changes that could not just break, but expose eventually your data, right? And I think that's where I've seen a challenge, which goes back to the person in the room, that developer, those code reviews. How do you ensure that all that code that is being added is safe? So you can start upstream, right, with your guardrails, SCPs, policies, codes, sentinel policies, so on and so forth, even with gateways, AI gateways now, right? But then how do you ensure that there's still somebody in the room during those code reviews to ensure that whatever is going out to production is safe?
Yeah. Done. Problem solved. Guardrails. Well, I think that's the challenge, isn't it? I mean, there's the question of, we're talking a lot about code gen. I think code generation is a big focus. I think luckily there's a lot of us who are quite a little bit more experienced know that code gen is just the kind of the beginning of this wonderful AI iceberg. But if we talk less about the idea of just code gen and more, you know, kind of shipping in general, you know, we want to move at AI speed. You know, that's just the fact of it. We've entered a new paradigm where no one is going to accept, like what Aaron raised before, oh, we spent 6 months on this, unless, well, what are we learning for those 6 months so that 6 months from now we can do it in 6 hours? The problem is, it doesn't matter if you do it in 6 hours if you blow everything up. And that's, you know, if there's any quote to take away from all of this, it's really on that, you know, thinking about how you can move at that speed and operate at that speed doesn't mean let's focus on going faster. It means, like we established, how can we focus on still going fast in a way that is safe, in a way that's secure? And that's creating systems that don't have the ability to send a $5,000 check out randomly. And that's something that I would, you know, really emphasize when you're thinking about the AI that you're working on. Remembering that it's not just a wide world of LLMs. You know, AI does not mean LLM. That is not the, and that's probably many people in this room who are like, duh, that's so obvious. But I have conversations every single day. I have roundtables around AI. And I ask the question of like, oh, well, you know, that problem you raised is obvious considering it's quite non-deterministic. Why don't you have a deterministic system? They're like, oh, what's that? I'm like, oh, okay. You run a platform engineering department with 50 people in it. we are in a jagged frontier at the moment, and we need to kind of understand people aren't going to know terminology. People aren't going to know many of the things that we're dealing with. And we, the ones here, need to kind of help shape that and take our time and really emphasize that we're talking about the same things, and that means definitions. We're defining things the same way. We're setting goals the same way. We're making sure that we are even setting goals that make sense. A goal of use more AI is never going to succeed, because what does it mean? And it's really the responsibility, whether you're the AI vendor selling in, to really understand those challenges, or whether you're an enterprise and you're running an AI initiative. Now, we're going to move over to some questions for the audience, but I want to ask, I think, really one very key question for some of the people here. Now, Aaron, hypothetically, if I was trying to sell an AI tool to a 4 trillion market cap company, no specifics on which 4 trillion market cap that might be, what would be the best way to sell an AI tool to that company, hypothetically?
Find some executive that doesn't care about security, that really needs what you're building. I'm not trolling. That's actually probably the best way to do it. Because if you're going through the door where you're going to get blocked by all these different things, which you're going to get blocked by all those different things anyway, and you're going to have to give your champion or executive person that's going to buy this, be solving a problem that's so important that they're willing to put in the effort to do the really kind of good faith security work and not just block it. Oh, LLM bad, go away. That's your job. Be a painkiller, not a vitamin. As a former startup founder, I learned this the hard way. 3 years later, failed startup, but whatever. So I think that's the answer to my question: is find a big enough problem. Find something that they vibe coded because they needed it so badly, but they just couldn't get past, the 20th prompt, and then build that for them, because they're clearly willing to buy. If they're willing to vibe code it, that might be a good test that they're willing to buy it too. There's my tip for the day. Sorry.
There you go. That's the one quote. So I think, are there any questions from the audience? I have hundreds of questions, so don't worry. But any questions, any topic, don't be shy. No? Wow, we covered. Yeah, there we go. I knew you had some. Well, now I have to run over there because it's just a...
Hey, so we often talk about, we were just talking about guardrails in regards to sort of moving at AI speed, I think is what the turn of phrase you used. I think the kind of the flip side of the coin of guardrails is also making the easiest thing to do, like the golden path, also the right thing. So I think often of let's say I want to go to the gym more often, leaving my running shoes at the door. It means that I see my running shoes more often. I ideate about running, and it means I might go to the gym more often. And I guess as we think about, the flip side of guardrails is it creating a great golden path. How do you make that sort of analysis of what should be a speed bump versus a guardrail?
I think the organization defines it. The use cases define it, but more specifically, the industry defines it. Take healthcare in perspective, right? HIPAA, NIST, PHI, so on and so forth. You know exactly who's going to decide that, right? That's a CISO in the room. You can have a solution, an AI solution. You could be a cloud service provider. You could be a reseller of Kubernetes platform. That's who's going to decide. They're the one who are going to be very prescriptive about NIST-based guardrails, SCPs, policy as code, 10 out of 10 times, right? So that's one. On the other hand, if you are in a non-regulated industry where you're still trying to figure out, kick the tires around your AI based business, right? Then you got to make that decision, right? As a as somebody who's building that product. I certainly work more in heavily regulated industries. And so for me, I already know when I'm walking in to a conversation that there are guardrails that I'm going to have to abide by. Yeah.
So the one caution I have for guardrails is if you make them too big, you're going to see a lot of what I call emails between somebody's personal account and somebody's work account, where they use their own private model or their own account with a bunch of workflows in it to do the work, not tell anybody, and then email back the results to themselves and use that to do their analysis. I'm not kidding. I'll bet if you go to any company's email server of size and look at the emails from to me, you'll see a lot of ChatGPT traffic there. And it's a good story, right? Because you can say, well, fire that person. And yes, they are breaking security rules. But if your guardrails are too high, the productivity lift from these tools is so great for a lot of different kinds of problems that people will be like, well, the rules are for other people. I'm going to be super safe with my thing. I'm not going to know that OpenAI might use your data for training. I'm not going to think about that. And by the time it shows up in the next model, you might be planning to be retired anyway or gone. And so you're going to get compliance in a very technical sense, but you're not going to actually get the kind of enthusiastic compliance that gives you actual security. You're going to get a lot of security theater and a lot of people working around rules to make the thing happen. So the guardrails have to be high enough to actually guard something, but not so high that they just become these impenetrable walls that make the productivity go around it, right? So just be aware of that.
When it comes to the...
I was just going to add, and sometimes you can challenge those guardrails. I was working with a customer, not to be named, and we're looking at a service mesh implementation. And the first thing is you look at their enterprise architecture guidelines to figure out what is it that you can do and what you can't do, what solution you can implement and what will definitely not be a no-go. So we were having this conversation and we went from a sidecar to a sidecar-less based conversation with an ambient mesh implementation. And somebody in the room rightfully raised their hand and said, well, that's never going to go through enterprise architecture. It's never going to go through your architecture review board. So like, okay, let's hear about it. And so you find out that within the enterprise architecture, their approach was to not use tunnels. It was a small footprint that said sidecar over tunnels. So if I was a trusted advisor, right, and I'm helping them with a service mesh implementation, there's no way in hell I'm going to introduce ambient into the conversation, right? So then you go back and you try to do your research and figure out why is this still relevant today? And in this case, believe it or not, I was able to dig in this based case study that actually talked the opposite, right? So almost always guardrails will win, especially in a regulated industry, but every now and then you will get an opportunity to kind of dig through and figure out why and if they're still relevant.
And to go a little bit onto the kind of other direction in thinking about a guardrail, like part of what that question was, you don't need to only deal with guardrails by making your guardrails simpler. That's part of the notion of the golden path. If we take, for example, Aaron's example of, oh, well, if it's too strict, people can't use the LLMs that they want. Well, if, developers are only allowed to use this LLM tool, but they would probably rather try Claude or try, ChatGPT or something. If they had, a cloud development environment that was completely secure, locked off from everything else, where they could code to their total freedom with the AI that they want, and it has zero ability to get out and blow anything else up. Well, then would they go on their personal device and put stuff into ChatGPT and then email it back? Probably not, because that's a whole hassle, when they could just be using it within the safer system, within the safer environment. That's this idea of a golden path. And so golden paths don't only need to be oh, well, we're just going to take a workflow and make it way better and make it way easier. It can also be we're going to incentivize good behavior by just making the bad behavior, removing the convenience factor. And that works in the guardrails front, but it also works in terms of you want something to be more productive. You know, we want people to use our portal, for example, or we want people to use this specific set of tooling, or we want people just to even use the platform. You know, they like to do things manually, but we want them to use the platform. Will you make it good enough, easy enough that they always opt to do it your way? Because why would they do it any other way? And it just so happens that your way also includes, you know, container image scanning by design. It includes the guardrails built into it. So you are incentivizing them. Just, you know, you don't have to even give them the carrot or the stick. Well, it's just an easier way to do it. So they would naturally do it that way. So you don't only have to think about golden paths and guardrails through those binaries.
Yeah. I was just going to add, one of the reasons businesses are successful, and the ones that I talk to, right, is there's this passionate bunch of developers that are hell-bent on bringing a very successful product out there, right? To enable them, the term that is often used is developer democratization, right? And so part of the reason platform engineering is successful is because through invoking that developer experience persona, it allows to open up those conversations to figure out what is it that is today not fitting into the guardrail that can fit into the guardrail, and how to make that happen. And oftentimes that's the distinction between how you see a successful business unit through a development effort take another product to the market or another feature. Yeah.
I love the example. I think I have a hilarious, at least to me, kind of funny example. So you think cursor installation is mostly something for software developers, right? Well, in a lot of companies, it's the first usable MCP client that they have in a company. So I've seen companies, I will not name them, but where finance people use cursor, not because they're writing any code, because it's their best MCP client, and they can string together a workflow using cursor the same way you might do with Cloud Desktop. We just haven't approved it, or they haven't approved it yet. That to me is an interesting story about guardrails, because at some point somebody thought, well, this is safe enough to give to devs, but not to business users. But business users, as clever as they can be, were like, well, am I allowed to download cursor? Yes. Anyway, it's just a funny story.
And we have no idea what organization he's talking about. And going back to that keyword, you know, AI speed. This exactly is how you get AI speed. It's by thinking about these ideas of how you're structuring your golden paths, how you're thinking about golden paths, how you're thinking about guardrails. That is where the AI speed comes from. It's, you know, automated validation. It's things where it's just making it easier. So naturally the negative ends up not happening. We've got a little bit more time left on the panel if anyone wants to ask another question. We spent a long time on that one because it was a banger. Oh, you guys, you should have thought about it before, but it's okay. We've got a little bit of time. You're here at the front, so I'll let you go ahead.
Yeah, I really like that idea of moving at AI speed. So I was wondering if you guys could give any examples, non-NDA examples, of a specific example where someone integrated AI into the platform side of things that extended beyond just code gen.
Yeah, so I think there are a couple of ways that you can address this. Most of the time that I see with organizations in a limited capacity that they're using AI, and I'm talking about AI for platform engineering. We've been talking largely about platform engineering for AI, is to help address observability gaps, help address when issues come up, right? Where an AI agent is looking at the state of a system and is not going to self-correct, and it's not going to auto-correct, but it's creating a Jira ticket, for example, to say, hey, I've noticed this behavior. This is what I think the issue is. You can address it. So I definitely have one customer where they're leveraging this to look at, report, and say, how good are you, right? It's like deterministic versus undeterministic, right? So customers are aware of the challenges, the way they're mitigating is by getting these models to kind of understand what that context is and what that error looks like, and will it be the same the next time and the time after, right? So definitely in the case of self-healing capabilities, so that's one. Observability is another one where I've seen it.
This is mine. Okay. So an example I can give, because we're going to write a blog post on it pretty soon, so I feel comfortable talking about it. We have an internal system that we built that takes unstructured data, like from meeting notes or from written status reports, whatnot, organizes it using a template system to put it into a wiki that we keep with open access to anybody. And the first problem we ran into was an interesting security problem. I want to use this on my meetings for my management team, but I want it to continually keep the rights updated in the generated wiki, that it gets updated over time. You add new topics, it just updates it. But we want to keep the security aligned to this other system. And the problem was there's no like unified system where we can get the rights. So we've had to kind of build our own bespoke kind of, we're still working on exactly how we kind of make those rights to who can read the content propagate based on who is in the meeting in some cases. But yeah, there's all sorts of really interesting problems. So that's one good example. We're not doing any kind of codegen at all, but the security around the content that gets generated out actually has to be quite, managed well.
So I'll give a quick specific example and then to kind of close us off as we run out of time. So just so you know, we're all going to hang out here. So if you have more specific questions, we can chat more. We can talk about stuff. I'll be here. So you at the back who had your question, feel free to ask. So the specific question would be, again, around thinking about what is AI good at versus what it's not good at. So a non-deterministic system is probably not going to be very good at writing a Terraform file because it's trained on and probably an infinite amount of Terraform files out there, which might not match your systems. It might not match what you need. So it's probably not going to look very good, or it's not going to work at all, or it's going to be like crazy verbose. It's going to be like 5 times longer than it needs to be. Maybe it works still. But an organization that I won't name, at the roundtable was talking about what they did instead. And what they did was their platform team went through all the kind of Terraform files that they were using, realized kind of 95% of them were incredibly similar, kind of cleaned those up a little bit, built them into specific templates, and then used the AI to retrieve the Terraform file that best suited the need. So rather than having the AI just generate a Terraform file, it was instead accessing almost a database of Terraform files that the organization knew worked and knew made sense. And then probably 95% of the time, it covered the use case that they needed. Then, of course, there's that 5%. That's when you make a Jira ticket and then you aggressively Teams message until you get what you want. But for the 95% of cases, that worked. And the key thing to really take away from there is thinking about what AI does well versus what it does not do well. Just a blanket non-deterministic system generating a Terraform file probably isn't going to do a very good job yet, but they're amazing at knowledge retrieval. There's probably hundreds of things in your organization where you can think about what AI does really well and then realize you're coming at a problem from the wrong way and come at it from a different direction. And to give a more vague kind of example after, when thinking about kind of AI success or good AI use cases, two different people at a roundtable telling a story about their attempts to kind of embed AI through their CI/CD and have it work. Well, one just tried to AIify their CI/CD pipeline. That was their mandate. You need to AIify everything. I'm not even going to have to do a show of hands of who thinks that was a disaster. It was a disaster. It didn't work at all. The other person told the story of being told, okay, we need to AIify our CI/CD. So really went and looked, okay, what is the slowest part of this process? What is the slowest part? Okay, this is what it is. Why is it slow? That's not a good use case for AI. That's not going to work. Okay, well, this is our third slowest, but this is something where AI would be fantastic. And then suddenly they haven't AIified everything. they're now using this fun catchphrase we've been throwing around. They're moving at AI speed, but still most of the pipeline is the same. It was just these few moments where AI was great and they honed in on that. And those are the things you want to think about and you want to look for. So we're just going to take a few minutes more if you guys have any closing points you wanted to say. And if not, we can just say a big thank you.
I validate what he's saying. I think knowing when problems are solved by deterministic systems, you have runbooks for that. We have calculators. We have all those things. Use them. Use them and use AI for stochastic problems. Use traditional computing for if-then problems. Simple.
Yeah, I would say if you work at an organization and which one is not resource starved and cash, right? So if you're going to address something, address a low-hanging fruit that still shows value and be able to clearly articulate that return on investment. You do that, it opens up more opportunities for the next use case.
And with that, I want to say a huge thank you, both Aaron and Faisal, for being here. And a huge thank you, everybody, for listening.